There's a moment in every life when the masks we wear become too heavy to carry, when the roles we play, the successful professional, the perfect parent, the strong friend, begin to feel like costumes that no longer fit. I spent decades as a Harvard psychologist believing I had all the answers about the human mind until a single journey to India stripped away everything I thought I knew about myself. What I discovered wasn't just another philosophy or teaching. It was a way of being that transformed not just how I saw the world, but how I experienced love itself. The guru who renamed me Ram Das taught me that we're all just walking each other home, and the path home isn't what any of us expected. Picture Richard Alpert, tenured professor at Harvard, standing in front of his psychology classes, speaking with authority about consciousness while being completely unconscious of his own patterns. This was me, brilliant on paper, empty in practice. The irony wasn't lost on me later, but at the time I was drowning in my own expertise. Each achievement felt hollow, each accolade another piece of armor that made it harder to breathe. The university walls that once felt like sanctuary began to feel like a prison, and the students looking up at me with expectation seemed to be asking questions I couldn't answer, not because I lacked knowledge, but because I lacked wisdom. The unraveling began with a simple question from a student. "Dr. Alpert, you know so much about the mind, but are you happy?" The question hung in the air like incense, and I realized I had no authentic answer. Happiness wasn't something I'd studied, it was something I'd assumed would come with success. But success, I was learning, was just another word for sophisticated suffering. The more I achieved, the more I felt like a fraud. The more I taught about consciousness, the more I realized I was sleepwalking through all my own life. This is what I've come to understand as the great unraveling, that moment when everything we thought we were begins to dissolve. It's terrifying and liberating at once. The ego fights back with everything it has, creating more drama, more urgency, more reasons why we need to hold on to the old ways. But consciousness has its own intelligence, and sometimes it orchestrates these breakdowns precisely because breakthrough is the only way forward. My journey to India wasn't escape. It was surrender to a process that had already begun within me. The Western mind has this beautiful and terrible obsession with becoming. We're always becoming something, becoming successful, becoming enlightened, becoming better, becoming worthy of love. But here's what I discovered sitting in caves with sadhus and walking dusty paths with pilgrims. Becoming is a prison we build with our own hopes and fears. Every time we say, "I'll be happy when," we're postponing the only moment where happiness can actually exist. Every time we chase after enlightenment, we're running away from the awareness that's already here. I remember sitting with my guru, Neem Karoli Baba, watching him exist in a state of complete presence. He wasn't trying to become anything. He wasn't seeking enlightenment because he was enlightenment. The difference was staggering. While I was frantically taking notes and asking questions about spiritual techniques, he was simply being. His love wasn't something he had to generate. It was something he was. This wasn't a skill he'd developed. It was a recognition of what had always been true. The tragedy of becoming is that it keeps us forever one step away from ourselves. We study meditation to become peaceful, but peace is our natural state when we stop agitating ourselves with constant mental movement. We practice love to become loving, but love is what we are when we remove the barriers we've built around our hearts. The spiritual path isn't about acquiring something new, it's about recognizing what's always been present. But the mind, trained in the economics of effort and reward, struggles to accept that the treasure we're seeking is already in our possession. This is why Eastern wisdom speaks of enlightenment as awakening, not achieving. You don't become conscious. You recognize that consciousness is what you are. You don't become love. You discover that love is the ground of your being. The shift from becoming to being is subtle but revolutionary. It's the difference between swimming upstream and floating downstream. It's the difference between wearing a mask and recognizing your original face. For years, I searched for the perfect teacher, the ultimate technique, the final understanding that would complete my spiritual journey. I read every sacred text, learned every meditation practice, and collected insights like trophies. But the harder I sought, the more elusive the truth became. I was like a person wearing sunglasses, searching everywhere for the sun, never realizing that the very thing I was looking for was providing the light by which I was searching. The breakthrough came in the most ordinary moment. I was sitting quietly, not even meditating formally, just resting in the space between thoughts. Suddenly I heard a voice, not external, not mystical, but intimate and familiar. It was saying, "You are what you've been looking for." Not "you will find what you're looking for," but "you are what you've been looking for." The seeker and the sought were the same presence, looking at itself through the mirror of experience. This recognition changed everything. The guru I'd been seeking in caves and ashrams was the same awareness looking through my eyes. The divine I'd been pursuing in rituals and practices was the consciousness aware of pursuing. The teacher I'd been hoping to find was the one who had always been present, patiently waiting for me to turn my attention inward. This wasn't a philosophical concept, it was a direct experience of the truth that had been hidden in plain sight. The mind wants to make this complicated, to turn it into another spiritual technique or achievement. But the guru in the mirror is simply the recognition of what's always been true. When you look at another person, especially someone you love, there's a moment when you see beyond their personality, beyond their story, beyond their problems. You see the essence looking back at you. That essence is the same in both of you. That's why love is possible. That's why compassion arises naturally. That's why we recognize truth when we hear it, because we're recognizing ourselves. We speak of love as if it's something we fall into or out of, something we have or lose, something we give or receive. But what if love isn't a transaction at all? What if love is the fundamental fabric from which everything else is woven? This understanding didn't come to me through study or meditation. It came through heartbreak. When my guru died, I thought I would lose the love I felt for him. Instead, I discovered that love doesn't depend on the object of love. Love is the subject, the ground, the very nature of consciousness itself. The love I'm speaking of isn't the romantic love celebrated in songs and movies, though that can be a doorway to it. It's not even the familial love that binds us to our children and parents, though that too carries its fragrance. The love that is truth is causeless, objectless, and unconditional. It doesn't arise because someone is beautiful or kind or useful to us. It arises because love is what we are, and recognition of this truth is what we call awakening. I've watched people struggle with this concept, especially those who've been hurt by love or who've never felt deeply loved. They ask, how can love be fundamental when there's so much hatred and cruelty in the world? The answer lies in understanding that what we call hatred is actually love in disguise. Love that has been wounded, love that has been corrupted by fear, love that has been twisted by trauma. But underneath the most hardened heart, underneath the most defensive personality, love continues to pulse like a hidden spring waiting to be discovered. This shift in understanding changes everything about how we relate to others. When we recognize that love is not something we possess, but something we are, we stop trying to get love from others and start offering it freely. We stop being merchants of affection, calculating what we give based on what we receive. We become sources of love rather than seekers of love. This isn't sainthood, it's simply a more accurate way of being human. The practice becomes noticing when we're withholding love and asking why. Usually it's because we're afraid of being hurt or disappointed. But withholding love is like holding our breath. It might protect us from drowning, but it also prevents us from living fully. When we offer love without condition, without expectation, without agenda, we discover that love is inexhaustible. The more we give, the more we have. The more we are, the more we become. If love is the ground of being, then letting go is the art of returning to that ground. Most of us spend our lives accumulating experiences, relationships, achievements, possessions, believing that having more will make us more. But the spiritual path is a path of subtraction, not addition. It's about letting go of everything that isn't essential until only essence remains. I learned this most powerfully through my stroke. In one moment, everything I thought I was, the articulate teacher, the independent man, the physical body I'd taken for granted, was stripped away. I couldn't speak clearly, couldn't move without help, couldn't even go to the bathroom without assistance. Everything the ego had claimed as mine was revealed to be temporary, fragile, ultimately not mine at all. The stroke was devastating and liberating at once. But here's what I discovered. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. There's a profound difference between the two. Giving up is collapse, defeat, resignation. Letting go is release, trust, surrender to what is. Giving up says, I can't handle this. Letting go says, I don't need to handle this alone. Giving up closes the heart. Letting go opens it. The sacred art of letting go begins with recognizing what we're actually holding on to. Usually, it's not the things themselves, but our stories about the things. We hold on to relationships that have ended, not because we miss the person, but because we miss the story of who we were with that person. We hold on to achievements from the past, not because they still matter, but because they prop up our sense of identity. We hold on to grudges, not because they serve us, but because they give us the illusion of being right. Letting go is like opening a clenched fist. When we hold tightly, we can't receive anything new. When we relax our grip, we discover that we were never really holding anything anyway. We were just exhausting ourselves with the effort of grasping. The things that are truly ours come and go naturally. The things that aren't ours cause suffering precisely because we're trying to possess what cannot be possessed. The deepest letting go is letting go of the one who is letting go. As long as there's a me doing the spiritual work, there's still someone trying to get somewhere, achieve something, become something. The ultimate surrender is the dissolution of the surrenderer. This isn't annihilation. It's the recognition that what we thought we were was never real in the first place. What remains is pure awareness, pure love, pure being. None of us signed up for suffering, but all of us received it as part of the human package. The question isn't whether we'll experience pain, we will. The question is whether we'll transform that pain into wisdom or let it harden into bitterness. Suffering, I've learned, is optional. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is what we add to pain through our resistance, our stories, our refusal to let the experience be what it is. When I was young, I thought the goal of life was to avoid suffering. Later, I thought the goal was to transcend it. Now I know the goal is to dance with it. Suffering is not the enemy of awakening, it's often the doorway. Our wounds become our wisdom, our darkness becomes our light, our deepest pain becomes our greatest gift to others because it's where we learn compassion. The stroke taught me this viscerally. For months I was trapped in a body that wouldn't obey my commands, dealing with depression that felt like a lead blanket over my soul. I could have spent that time being angry at God, at my body, at the randomness of life. Instead, I chose to be curious about this new experience of being human. What was it like to need help with everything? What was it like to be vulnerable in ways I'd never been before? What was it like to be loved, not for what I could do, but simply for who I was? This is the dance with suffering. Not pushing it away, not wallowing in it, but moving with it like a skilled dancer moves with a challenging partner. You don't fight the music, you find the rhythm. You don't resist the steps, you learn them. You don't try to change your partner, you discover how to move together gracefully. The deepest suffering comes from the illusion that we're separate from life, separate from love, separate from each other. This illusion is so fundamental to human experience that we rarely question it. We look out at the world and see a collection of separate objects, trees, buildings, people, sky, all existing independently. We look inside and see a separate self, distinct from everything else. This perception creates the basic anxiety of existence, the fear of being alone, abandoned, ultimately insignificant. But what if this perception is just that, a perception, not a reality? What if the boundaries between self and other, between inside and outside, between sacred and ordinary, are more like convenient fictions than absolute truths? This isn't philosophy, it's direct experience available to anyone willing to look beyond the surface of things. I remember sitting by the Ganges River, watching the water flow past, and suddenly realizing that I couldn't find where the river ended and the bank began. The water was constantly reshaping the earth, and the earth was constantly channeling the water. They were dancing together, creating each other moment by moment. Then I looked at my own breath and realized the same thing was happening. Where did I end and the air begin? The oxygen I breathed it had been part of countless other beings. The carbon I exhaled would become part of plants and trees. The boundary between me and not me was as fluid as the riverbank. This recognition of interconnection isn't just poetic, it's practical. When we truly understand that we're not separate from life, we stop fighting it. When we recognize that we're not separate from others, we stop fearing them. When we see that we're not separate from the divine, we stop seeking it. The very thing we've been looking for, we are. The very love we've been seeking, we are. The very peace we've been chasing, we are. The illusion of separation is maintained by the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and who others are. These stories create the drama of likes and dislikes, attractions and aversions, us and them. But beneath every story is the same consciousness looking out through different eyes, the same love expressing itself through different forms, the same being playing different roles in the cosmic drama. When people ask about my spiritual practice, they expect me to talk about meditation cushions and morning prayers, sacred texts and ritual observances. But the most profound spiritual practice I've discovered is surprisingly ordinary. Serving others without keeping score. Not service as a duty or obligation, but service as recognition. Recognition that the divine in me is serving the divine in you, and there's really no difference between the two. This understanding transformed the Siva Foundation from a charity into a spiritual community. We weren't helping them, the blind, the poor, the suffering, out of pity or righteousness. We were serving ourselves in different forms, recognizing that healing one part of the web heals the whole web. When we restore sight to someone in Nepal, we're healing our own blindness to interconnection. When we feed the hungry in Guatemala, we're nourishing our own souls. This isn't metaphor, it's direct experience. True service happens when the servant disappears. As long as there's someone doing good for someone else, there's still separation, still ego, still the subtle violence of helper and helped. But when service flows naturally, like water finding its level, there's no one doing anything for anyone. There's just love expressing itself through whatever form is needed. The mother caring for her child doesn't think she's being spiritual. She's just being what she is. The friend listening to another's pain isn't practicing compassion. Compassion is practicing itself through the friendship. This is why recognition matters more than reward in genuine service. When we serve for acknowledgement, for feeling good about ourselves, for spiritual points, we're still in the marketplace of ego. But when service arises spontaneously from seeing clearly, there's no one to recognize and nothing to reward. The service itself is complete. The love itself is fulfillment. I learned this most deeply through my stroke, not by serving others, but by being served. Suddenly, I needed help with everything: eating, bathing, moving from bed to chair. My independence, which I'd worn like armor, was stripped away. I had to learn to receive care without shame, to be vulnerable without protection, to accept love without earning it. This was perhaps the hardest and most important spiritual lesson of my life. The stroke didn't happen to punish me or teach me humility. It simply happened, like rain or sunrise, like birth or death. But how I met it determined whether it would be curse or blessing, tragedy or grace. At first I fought it. My mind raged against the limitations, the slurred speech, the body that wouldn't obey. I grieved the loss of who I thought I was, the articulate teacher, the independent man, the spiritual guide who had his act together. But gradually I began to see the stroke differently. What if it wasn't something that happened to me, but something that happened through me? What if my vulnerability could serve others who were struggling with their own limitations? What if my broken speech could speak more eloquently than my former eloquence? What if my weakness could demonstrate a strength that doesn't depend on physical capability? This shift in perspective transformed everything. The stroke became my teacher, not my enemy. It taught me about unconditional love, love that doesn't depend on my being useful, articulate, or impressive. It taught me about grace, the unearned gift of being held by something larger than my individual will. It taught me about the courage required not for heroic action, but for ordinary vulnerability. The people who cared for me during this time weren't just helping a disabled person. They were practicing the highest spiritual discipline. They were loving without condition, serving without recognition, giving without expectation. They were walking me home, and in doing so, they were finding their own way home. This is how grace works. It transforms everyone it touches, giver and receiver alike, until the distinction disappears. When I say we're all just walking each other home, I'm not speaking metaphorically. This human experience is a journey from separation back to unity, from fear back to love, from the illusion of isolation back to the truth of connection. None of us knows the way completely. None of us can make the journey alone. We need each other, not just for comfort or companionship, but for awakening itself. The soul doesn't incarnate to achieve individual enlightenment. It comes to remember itself through relationship, through community, through the beautiful mess of being human together. We're all aspects of the same consciousness, exploring itself through seemingly separate forms. When I help you remember who you are, I'm remembering who I am. When you hold space for my suffering, you're healing your own pain. When we love each other unconditionally, we're discovering the love that we are. This journey home isn't a return to some distant paradise or past innocence. Home is here, now, in this moment of connection. Home is the recognition that we were never actually lost, just temporarily forgetful. Home is the love that has been present all along, waiting patiently for us to stop running and remember. Home is what we discover when we finally realize that the seeker and the sought are one, that the lover and the beloved are one, that the pilgrim and the path are one. The walking never ends, but the arriving is always happening. Every moment of genuine connection is a homecoming. Every act of real love is a recognition. Every experience of true presence is a return to what we've always been. We don't reach home by getting somewhere else. We discover that everywhere we've ever been was home, and we just needed eyes to see it. So we keep walking together, souls in temporary costume, playing at being separate while remembering our unity. We comfort each other's fears while knowing there's ultimately nothing to fear. We help each other heal while recognizing that wholeness was never actually broken. We love each other awake while discovering that consciousness itself is love in action. This is the miracle of consciousness, not that we become aware, but that awareness becomes us. Not that we find love, but that love finds itself through us. Not that we go home, but that home comes to us, moment by moment, breath by breath, heart to heart, as we walk each other gently back to who we've always been. The teaching is complete when teacher and student disappear into the truth they've been sharing. The healing is finished when healer and patient merge into the wholeness they've been seeking. The journey is over when we realize we never left, and it begins again when we remember that everyone else is still trying to find their way. So we keep walking, keep loving, keep serving, keep awakening, not because we have to, but because it's what love does when it recognizes itself everywhere it looks.